It's Lent again. It's come round quickly, as somebody said to me on Thursday. With it come the traditions of pancakes, ashes, and abstinence, or perhaps temptations, whichever way you want to think about it. Have you given anything up for Lent? Anybody? Wine? Anything else? Just wine. Okay. Time. Yes, time. Yeah. Are you challenging yourself to do without something for the 40 days of Lent? You mustn't forget, have the wine on Sundays, because the Sundays are not part of the 40 days. That's really important to remember that. I want to explore the testing of Jesus in the wilderness first and see what Luke is telling us in this story. You've just heard the reading. There are 3 tests. The first is about food. The Satan asks Jesus to use his authority as the Son of God to meet his personal needs. Jesus has been out there in the wilderness for 40 days. It's a long time. I'm not even sure I can begin to imagine the level of hunger that someone might get to after 40 days. Can you? I think, a day's long enough. 40 is just too long. There is a connection, of course, with that very first temptation in the Garden of Eden that the serpent goaded Eve into, and she failed. She ate of the tree of knowledge, and she succumbed. So often, food is an area of temptation. And for us, in 2025, there are people out there, you don't appear to be amongst them, but they'll be working to avoid chocolate and cakes or desserts, for example, during this period. So this first temptation, this first test, is about ourselves. It was about Jesus. Did he put his own needs first? Was he going to use his own power to serve himself? Jesus, unlike Eve, and I dare say some of us, didn't fail. The second temptation is about power. The Satan was offering Jesus the expected role of the Messiah, the avenging king on a mighty steed coming to overthrow the occupying powers of Rome. But that wasn't Jesus' calling. It wasn't Jesus' intent, and it wasn't his way. Jesus embodies a different kind of Messiah. And this one, the one that the Satan was inviting him to lean into, to take advantage of, was not the right one. Jesus' mission is about saving others, about opening the way to God, about love and compassion and solidarity, not about asserting any kind of worldly power. The third test is about spectacle. Jumping from the pinnacle of the temple and expecting God to save Jesus' mortal body from harm. That's a tricky test to understand, but I think it boils down to power and influence again. In the ancient world, if this had worked, it probably would have been seen as some kind of magician's trick. Would have probably brought fame, possibly wealth too, to one who could do amazing things. But that's not our Jesus, is it? He was on a path to a humiliating death on the cross through a relatively short life of service, not spectacle. So what else does this account speak to us of? The 40 days in the wilderness echo the 40 years that the exiles spent in the wilderness. And of course the wilderness itself is another echo. Jesus' response to the Satan come from Deuteronomy. The connection with Deuteronomy reminds us that each of these tests is a test that the exiles failed. When they were on their journey through the wilderness, they failed so many times. Of course, we remember that they could have done that journey in a matter of days. But they had to be kept wandering for 40 years because of the sinful generation that had to be eliminated and the new generation born and raised. It has to be said that those hearing Luke's account would have known the Hebrew scriptures far better than we do. And so they would have known the whole story behind each of Jesus' responses. When he mentions Deuteronomy 8:3, one does not live by bread alone, the context of the hunger of the exile would have come to mind. The reminder that while God tested them by hunger, God also fed them with manna to make them understand that bread is not everything. The second temptation brings a different response. It is written, worship the Lord your God and only him. Deuteronomy 6:13, which is a really firm reminder of where power sits, with God and with no one else. Moses even provided the exiles with a creed called the Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4, which advocates for them to remember who gave them the land and admonishes them to worship and serve the Lord. The third test has got a really clear response. Don't put the Lord your God to the test. And of course that comes from the time of testing in Deuteronomy, when Moses exhorts the people not to test the Lord as they did at Massah, a place of quarrelling, when the people demanded water from Moses, which he finally obtained by striking a rock. There's something really powerful for me in this recognition that Jesus passed every test, in contrast with the people. Both Adam and Eve and the exiles, and you and me as broken humanity, we fail. We try, but we often fail. Jesus did not fail. Jesus was resolute. Jesus knew the scriptures, knew who he was and what he stood for, understood his calling, understood his commitment to his role as Messiah, and followed the path that God had put him on. If Jesus had been the Messiah that the Satan offered him the opportunity to be, one of unequaled power, able to provide food in abundance, reign over the kingdoms of the world, capable of demonstrating this invincibility, then Jesus wouldn't have been true to himself as the Messiah he was called to be. Are you, am I, being true to the people that God has called us to be? Think back right to the start of this, when we thought about what we're trying to do or avoid in this Lenten season. Whilst we try to give up wine, because that's the only thing you've admitted to, or maybe avoid social media or fast from something that we enjoy as an endurance or penance, who or what are we struggling against? Think about the last time you had a conversation with yourself about whether you were going to have that last portion of pudding or whether you were going to watch yet another episode of that box set. It's really just a battle with ourselves, isn't it? Is that what Lent is really all about? I think that this period of 40 days might be an opportunity to explore who we really are and what God is asking of us in this life. To do something quite risky and challenging, and to face ourselves in all our deepest authenticity. Perhaps we won't like what we find, but if we don't look, we will never really know. Gavin gave us a reflection in the staff meeting this week, and one of the questions was an invitation to consider what our deepest sadness was. That isn't a place that I like to go very often, but the invitation was to go there again and to explore it from a different perspective. So I've been doing that a bit at a time this week, in combination with another practice, one of asking why. And when you get the answer, asking why again, and doing that 5 times. I've found some depths of pain that I didn't expect to ever uncover again. But then I have done what I was asked, and I looked at it from a different perspective, and I noticed how God has been alongside me throughout and continues to be alongside me. I am very sure that when you go digging into your depths, you will also find that God has been there in the mess and the mire with you, because God always is. This morning I found something that I want to share with you. You'll know that Gavin shares with you from Richard Rohr, and I share with you from Anne Voskamp, and this is her latest book. Just 2 paragraphs. We only ever taste true joy because Jesus tasted the worst sorrow. Swallow the sweet relief of that and taste and see how very good the Lord is, because he tasted all the very worst to be with us. You can sit ramrod straight and nod that you believe in the goodness of God, but that isn't in any way the same as having tasted and savoured the miraculous grace of a God who drank down the dregs of your worst nightmare so that you can wake to fully living, fully loved. And she goes on a bit further. Explaining God isn't the same as experiencing God. Like believing in the realness of God isn't the same as actually tasting the relief of God. And whatever you've drunk down as relief, you'll crave more of. What you crave, there your soul is. And if you're not thirsting for God, the question for the soul is, what are you deathly drunk on that is deceptively destroying you? Or how are you dangerously dehydrated in ways that are slowly but surely withering you to death? If you're not thirsting for God, when was the last time you sat still long enough to truly savour the richness of his love for you? You can't taste anything you aren't close enough to touch. We can avoid these places in our lives very easily if we skate over the surface. If we think Lent is about chocolate pancakes and avoiding swearing, for example. But if we do a more careful inventory of our hearts and spirits, we might truly uncover all that God is calling us to in this season. We might grow closer to conforming to the image of the Son, and we might engage more deeply in a discipleship pathway toward God through Jesus. Salvation comes again and again with a deep recognition of what parts of self do I need to be saved from, and how Jesus can do that for me. When Jesus refuses to engage in those tests of the Satan, he doesn't say no because he is better than us, better than the Satan, or because he is more holy. He says no because he knows who he is in relationship with God, knows what he stands for, understands his own mission, and refuses to betray himself for the wrong kind of glory. He doesn't turn away from the realities of his humanity, from the calling to the cross, but he makes a choice about who he wants to be, what matters most to him, and how he wants to live. In this Lenten season, we have the same opportunities to make the choices to live for Christ, to be true to God and to the love which God offers us through Christ, and to be witnesses for the gospel. Is that the choice that you will make afresh with me today? Amen. We sing, and I'd invite you to sing this one sitting down. Come, thou fount of every blessing,